Now then, how's it going and welcome to the channel. The following is taken from my podcast The Film Fella and Friends and is part of the Real Natter series. In this one I'm joined by the host of the podcast That Song From That Movie, Dietrich Jeffries, and entertainment journalist and Spidey fanatic Eammon Jacobs, as we talk all things Spider-Man and more specifically Miles Morales. This is a four-parter to cover the four areas we ended up discussing. Part 1 goes over Miles' comic book origins and introduction, Part 2 covers the 2018 film Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, Part 3 the subsequent soundtrack to said movie, and finally Part 4 covering the much acclaimed new Insomniac Games Miles Morales game on the PlayStation 4 and 5. For the full entire podcast, head over to your favourite podcast player and search for The Film Fella and Friends. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and chuck us a cheeky like for more content like this very soon. Anyway, enough from me, on with the show!
The Film Fella.
I guess we should probably talk about the film. You know, that tiny little film that we were on about earlier.
I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, though.
Yeah, no, that really niche indie film that came out a few years ago.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I don't know if there's anything more I could say on it. In fact, it just sums it up. I loved it.
Obviously, on the podcast, I sort of spun off. I don't know why I went a bit crazy and spun off and made loads of different series, like some sort of like Big Time Charlie. I don't know why. Obviously, the reason I've called this one Real Natter is because obviously we're just having a natter about Miles Morales. Usually, we would do for a review on the podcast anyway. We would do like a be right or proper shite. See if it's any good. But I just thought that was completely pointless for this one, mainly because I feel like unanimously not a single one of us would say that this was a terrible film. So it was just pointless. Might as well just talk about it instead of reviewing it, because it'd be ridiculous. Also, we're 2 years late.
Yeah.
I was floored by it on every level. The animation style, the way that every single spider hero was animated differently and had a different look to match their universe. You know, the personal story of Miles Morales was perfectly done.
Yeah, I agree.
And perfectly translated. And, you know, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, but the shot that always sticks with me is the second time he looks at the spider suit and he's like level with it and you can see his face like
In the reflection.
Yeah.
Because obviously first time you see it, he's like looking up and it's bigger than him. Yeah. And then obviously you get the beautiful, beautiful shot of him falling and or rising, depending on how you look at it, towards New York, with that incredible song over the top. That
whole section is just like perfect. I mean, the film's perfect, but that section is like we mentioned earlier. It's like, just in terms of tidbits, this obviously won the Academy Award in 2019. It was nominated for like 71 awards, won 40. I'm pretending like I'm just looking at this here.
Just on top of my head, I think it won 40. Yeah.
but yeah, like it won a ton of awards, which obviously for an animated film, you know, the one thing that I didn't even really think about when I was doing the research for this, winning these awards against your big studios in Disney, in Pixar, like, you know, according to these notes here, it was the first film to sort of beat non-Pixar Disney since 2011, and the first one to win since Happy Feet in 2006. So, like, you know, it's a long time for just one animation studio to just completely dominate. Like in the Academy Awards, obviously Oscar winning and everything. This film is just huge. Again, I don't know what else you can really say. We're gonna have to think of something. But
yeah, it's gonna be the podcast. We're just all it's good. Yeah,
it's great. It's brilliant. No, like I think even the array of talent that they've got in it is impressive. Do you know what I mean? It's like, obviously I know you've got Shamik Moore, who is relatively new to the scene, aside from a few Netflix things. I was
going to say, when I was looking, obviously doing the research into the characters, and I don't know why, I'd never really like properly looked into who plays him. And yeah, his IMDb page is quite bare compared to, obviously you go through like your Chris Pines, your
Nicolas Cage.
Hey fellas.
Nicolas Cage, obviously, John Mulaney's, all that, obviously, loads of things that they're attached to. Yeah, it was an interesting sort of off the side
But I like that
choice.
as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They didn't feel the need to cast big, which I think is quite right for Miles, like introducing somebody new.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, whoever came up with the Peter B. Parker idea, just
Sensational.
top.
I mean, everything
bloody
about Peter B. Parker. So I'm assuming, like, I'm kind of just going into all this, just assuming that whoever either clicks on the video or listens to the podcast has already seen the film. There might be a very small.
If
there
you
might be
haven't seen Spiderverse, go see Spiderverse.
Pause. Go watch it. Come back.
Come back, and then we'll carry on. But it's one of those where that everything about Spider B. Parker, so obviously, as the name implies, he's sort of like the second Peter Parker that is in the film, hence the B, which also they link very cleverly to Uncle Ben, which kind of works as well. All really, really smart sort of connections with it. But he's just, when I was reading about it, he is literally just an amalgamation of every version of Peter Parker we've ever seen ever. Like, that was the whole idea behind him, was that, you know, all the intro, all the backstory where he goes, oh, 1 second, let's just do this again, and goes through the comic book, which, again, they're perfect. All the little intros for each character are so well done. But his is literally like, you've got a bit of Tom Holland, you've got a bit of Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, you've got like the animated Spidey series, you've just everything. But then with the casting choice of like Jake Johnson, who obviously I hope most people would know from New Girl. I'm a recent convertee to New Girl. I always thought it was like a very girly program. I never really even bothered to.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I saw the adverts for it. I didn't put myself in front of it. I didn't watch it. I didn't bother because I just presumed it was like, you know, like Sex in the City or something. I don't know why. I watched it earlier on this year during lockdown, and I literally couldn't stop. Like, it is just amazing. And obviously him in that series, he sort of plays like a caricature of himself in real life, which he then sort of rolled into Peter B. Parker. Just this very happy-go-lucky, kind of not bothered, like just not really bothered about anything because he's been there, done that. Quite lazy because he can just do it. Like, it's just his job, isn't it? And he's not. Yeah. It's almost like the equivalent of someone working in like a call center office, just clocking in, doing the job, clocking out. But in this version, he's Spider-Man. He can do it, so it doesn't even really bother him to try, or it's perfect.
It's the bit in the shower that gets me every time, where he's like crying in the shower after breaking up with MJ, and then he, in the narration, he's like, "Oh yeah, I was sitting in my flat doing like crunches or something," and he's sat there eating pizza
in my apartment, doing push-ups, doing ab crunches, getting strong.
I was like, I can relate big time.
It's a very relatable film, and or a very relatable character, especially because like the whole concept of like Miles Morales, obviously the game pushes on it that we'll talk about later, and just everything in general is that anyone can wear the suit, including this version of Peter Parker that is just like everyone else. He's a slob like you. He gets depressed. He eats pizza, but he's also a superhero. So I thought that was quite clever. It's a very good, you know, it's the iteration that you would, you know, as a comic book reader, the Spiderverse is vast, and there is obviously hundreds of thousands of Spider-Men out there. There's obviously going to be a slobby one somewhere. It was the perfect one.
But as well, I really like the arc that he has, that Miles inspires him, because like by the end of it, you know, he's working with him, and he's like, they have that leap of faith moment where they completely switch, which I thought was really touching, like, because obviously Miles is like the new generation, he's the legacy character, and before he's like, oh, it's a leap of faith when you're web slinging, like, it is what it is, cool. And that moment just becomes so much more powerful when he says it back to him, and it's like...
There's a pause, isn't there, as well, during that scene? There's just like that pause of, you're right. And then, it is. Again, there's so many of those moments in the entire film, like all the way through, that obviously, like, I hadn't watched this film for probably at least a year. Like, I've probably only watched it maybe 3 or 4 times ever. I'm notoriously bad at once I've watched a film, even if I like it, as someone that calls himself the film fella, You know, I like a film and I watch it, but then for some reason in my brain, I'm like, well, I've got to watch every other film that exists in the universe, which means I haven't got time to rewatch something that's like 2 hours of my time that I could use to watch this new film. And then it tends to be I watch the new film and it's nowhere near as good as the film that, you know, I could have watched that I've enjoyed more. So when I was rewatching this, it was nice. I noticed all those moments, you know, like you just said, the eye line bit, the bit where it flips back, even the bit at the beginning where he's he's in a monologue when he's watching Chris Pine's Peter Parker, who also does not sound 26, by the way. He sounds way too he sounds way too wise for his years, which I know is what they're getting at. But like when he flips onto the ceiling to try and break the collider the first time, and he's like, oh wow, how does he do that? He does the same move pattern at the end to do it, and then Peter B. Parker and Gwen are like, oh, how did he do that? And it like mirrors the whole thing.
That's cool.
Nice.
I like it just because of rewatching it, I was like, yeah, they've done that, and it's one of those films where they've clearly put obviously they were going to put a lot of thought into it because it's a very big IP character, and like we've discussed, Miles is new territory for some people, so they've got to put the effort in to get people on board with it. But just noticing those little subtle, you know, cinematic bits that they've done to sort of tie it all together in a nice little bow was really nice.
It's really nice.
Really nice.
Yeah, and as someone who hasn't read the comics and doesn't really know much about Miles Morales, after what you've explained about how Miles' story, how his origin story, it sounds like they were pretty true to that as well.
Yeah, they very cleverly adapted it in a way that's, because obviously there is a big, like I said, a personal aspect to the comic where it's like this family focus. They still managed to keep that in, but make his origin a bit more exciting, like and cool, because that bit where they're doing the graffiti wall, is just stunning. Like I was
going to say that the Aaron Davis in this unit, like I mean the Aaron Davis in the video game, the Aaron Davis, obviously they've cast Childish Gambino,
Donald Glover.
Yeah, Donald Glover. I do this a lot. I do this podcast, and like I do know people. I'm not an idiot. I get in front of a microphone, and all of a sudden, everyone's name just like flings out of my head.
Oh, I'm the same. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, they've obviously cast a really cool. Like he's cool in real life. I'm sure that if and when they go back to his character in the MCU, he's going to be super cool, super interesting. But this version, Mahershala Ali's version, is so cool. Like his flat, his apartment,
it's just amazing.
It's just everything about him, the way that he talks, what he does, it is so on point with all that. That
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned Childish Gambino though, because actually Miles is partially inspired by Donald Glover.
Yeah.
So in an episode of Community, he wears Spider-Man pajamas.
Oh yeah.
And genuinely, this isn't just like.
Is this where this came from?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Wasn't it like part of a campaign to get him in the MCU version as Peter Parker?
Yeah, there was. Yeah. So basically, he was in these pajamas for like it's literally a brief shot, and that episode is actually in Spiderverse as well. In the background on Aaron Davis's TV is a shot of Childish Gambino.
Yeah.
But basically, there was this huge fan campaign to get him in The Amazing Spider-Man before Andrew Garfield was cast.
Right.
And obviously, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But at the time, Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Kelly were developing this idea of Miles, and were like, not a bad visual to go from. And kind of went from there, which I think is just amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. Like, and like, I can't wait. Obviously, I know a slight tangent, but I can't wait for like the whatever MCU flavor of Miles we get, because it's coming. I think quite a bit like the video game, which we'll talk about soon. I can't see them personally killing off Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But I can see them doing a Spider-Man. Like, I can see they might wait until Holland gets a bit older so that he's a bit, college student in the universe or something like that, and maybe having a bit more of a I don't know,
a
like
mentor kind of figure.
Yeah, in that sense. Like,
well, I mean, there'd be something kind of quite sweet of, you know, him having Tony Stark as a mentor, and then obviously he's going to have Doctor Strange as a mentor in the next one, for him to be that role, for somebody else. And bold statement. Tom Holland is great, but I think the sooner we get Miles Morales in the MCU, the better. Personally, I would quite happily have the third film be Tom Holland's last, and then get Miles Morales. Maybe that's just me. But
I don't
you mean
know.
you weren't satisfied with hearing "I've got a cousin"? There you go. That's all.
I was satisfied with that, but like, I'd rather see him in the MCU. Sort of, the sooner the better, really.
I want him in it. My opinion is I'd like to see like both, and like to play that out for a bit, and then maybe if they do get rid of Peter, it is one of those very impactful moments it'll be impactful in cinema, no doubt, but also like for people in general that don't know about the Death of Spider-Man comic, to maybe eventually. I just think that it'd be too soon to even do it after the third. Like, I want to enjoy Tom Holland a little bit more.
I think Tom Holland's going to be around for another few years, realistically. Like, they're casted young for a reason. They're going to want to get the mileage out of that kid.
I had heard, like, obviously this is all like, we got this covered and things like that, so obviously pinch of salt and everything. But they had said that the idea was for like a triple trilogy of obviously high school, trilogy, college, university. Then obviously he's going to be a young man, and then, you know, I'm assuming by then we might be at the very end of whatever this version of the MCU is anyway. So maybe it could be an organic way to do it. But yeah, we've gone off on a massive tangent there. We started talking about Peter Parker instead of Miles. This is the Miles Morales special.
The two go hand in hand, though.
Yeah, they do.
And, you know, like, never more so than in Spiderverse and in the game.
Hey, you're still here. Thanks for checking us out. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this coming very soon. I've no idea which part you're currently watching, but head here to watch the other parts from this episode. For the full podcast, simply search for The Film Fella and Friends on your podcast provider. That's it from me. See you in a bit.